The Aquest Podcast, Funds Industry Conversations.
Hello podcast listeners, and welcome to this episode of the Aquest Podcast with me, Danny Lawler. If you're new to the Aquest Podcast, do hit like and subscribe, and feel free to share it with your friends too. For this episode, I'm delighted to be joined by Clive Bellows, who's the president for EMEA for Northern Trust. But much more importantly, at least for the purposes of this podcast, Clive is the former chairman of Basis Point. Basis Point is the funds industry charity that has a particular focus on helping charities that help kids from disadvantaged backgrounds with access to education. It's a tremendous charity and one I think that everybody involved in the funds industry is rightly very proud of. So we begin our chat by talking about Clive's own journey and how he became president for EMEA in Northern Trust and how he got involved with Basis Point. We talk about some of the projects that Basis Point has supported and its philosophy and its approach to doing what it does. We wrap up then by talking about ways that people can get involved, including checking out basis.point.ie for all information on how to become a supporter or how to lend some of your time and volunteer. So, with that, let's get on with the show.
The Aquest Podcast, Funds Industry Conversations.
Hello Clive, you're very welcome to the Aquest Podcast. Great to have you on.
Delighted to be with you, thank you.
Tell us a little bit about yourself, Clive. We're going to talk broadly about Basis Point, the charity, but I'm interested to know about your own professional journey and how you ended up where you did.
Sure. So currently my role is president of EMEA for Northern Trust. It's not a term that I'm particularly fond of, but we like the term president for heads of businesses, if you like. But my path to becoming the head of EMEA for Northern Trust started way back in 1979 when I left school at 16 and got a job at what was then Barclays International in Poole in Dorset. And my career journey went from Barclays to what was then Chase Manhattan, became JP Morgan, on to Northern Trust, then on to Deutsche Bank, back to JP Morgan, and then for the last 15 years, I've been at Northern Trust, originally based 100% in Ireland as the Irish country head. And that involved me relocating my family, including my Irish wife, back to Ireland from the UK, where we've settled now, and it's very much home. But certainly that kind of experience of not going to university, which is very different to young people today, really helped me identify, I think, with some of the things that Basis Point do around making sure that young people get access to the right types of education.
Oh, that's very interesting. And in terms of your own education journey, was it, I guess, you didn't feel necessarily an affinity to going to further education, or was it more about access and availability?
So I think it's worth kind of going back to, the 70s and 80s in the UK were very different times to the way the world operates, whether it's the UK or Ireland now. I went to an all-boys secondary school. There was probably 100 of us in my year, and not one person went to university. So some people did go on and do A-levels, but I left, like I say, school at 16, and it was never really a thought that I was going to do anything other than get a job. And I honestly don't know how my parents would have reacted if I said I wanted to go on and do further education. But it was just not a topic that ever came up. Now, I was really lucky. I fell into, a quality organisation like Barclays via a friend of my father's. And Barclays were tremendous at then supporting young people. So although I didn't go to university, what they did do was sponsor me to do further education on a night class basis. So I did what was A-level equivalent, what was then called the Beck Business Studies course. And then after that, I then went on and did my banking exams. So I did have the beauty, if you like, of doing further education, albeit as night classes, whilst I was continuing to do a day job.
Yeah, it nearly sounds like an apprenticeship approach, doesn't it? Where you're working
and I look at some of the apprenticeship schemes that are coming available and online in both the UK and Ireland now, and I do think they are really worth considering for some young people. University isn't necessarily for everyone, and for the right type of people, particularly people who want to become lawyers and they want to become accountants or into the medical profession, of course they should go to university. But I do think it's good that there are other options that are now becoming available for young people.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And another episode in this season is with Martina Kelly. We talk about some of the apprenticeship options that are coming available, as you mentioned, Clive. And it's a really interesting development, and I guess a new way to get maybe new thinkers or new people who might not otherwise make their way into financial services involved in the industry. And I think that's can only be good.
Yeah, completely agree.
So then on to Basis Point. Tell us a little bit about what Basis Point does in case there's anybody who lives under a rock and hasn't heard of it.
So Basis Point is the charity that was created by a number of individuals who were heavily involved in the funds industry in Ireland. So that was a combination of some independent directors, some people that involved with some of the audit firms, some of the people that were involved in the fund administration custody world, and also asset managers. So it has become, in my view, the charity of choice for the funds industry in Ireland. And in the very early days, a decision was made that the charity should focus on helping the educational needs of underprivileged Irish children. And over the last, over a decade now, the charity has stayed true to those principles. And we've gone from, generating what I would say was tens and hundreds of thousands to, hugely significant amounts of money now, supporting a number of different charities who all have that same objective, which is making sure that education is available to everybody. And that starts from a very early age, children as they're beginning to read, right up to helping children as they leave school and go on to university.
I think one of the strengths of Basis Point is probably the fact that it has a very clear mission and a very clear focus on what it does. It doesn't try to, and there are many, many charitable causes and worthy charitable causes. But I think the fact that it focuses on this access to education helps because it gives it a clarity of purpose, and it's relevant for the industry that we're in as well.
Look, I think everybody can identify with it. And, I think all through our professional lives, you get exposure to lots of charities. And I'm very conscious that different individuals will have different things that motivate them from a charitable giving perspective. And, some people have said, look, I really like the work that Basis Point do, but I'm heavily aligned to another type of charity. And that's absolutely fine. What I would say, though, is within the financial services industry, certainly in Ireland, we are very lucky in that we have access to a really well-educated group of young people who continue to come into the industry. At Northern Trust, we have 1,800 people in Limerick, and we take hundreds of people every year from UL. And they're fabulous, hardworking, bright, enthusiastic, intelligent. But not everybody has that opportunity. And I think all of us who are living in Ireland, see evidence that not everybody is as fortunate as maybe those of us who are working in financial services. So I think having the ability to support young people and give them all of the advantages that other people take for granted, for me, is a really powerful thing.
Yeah, I think that the fact that a lot of people involved are connected with organizations of a size and with a level of resources is not a bad thing. It must be very helpful. But the organization itself, I said, it really has done some great work. Is there any particular highlights or any particular initiatives that have stuck with you?
So I think all of us involved with Basis Point have our own favourite charities that we work with, if you like. And I don't want to kind of distinguish between any of them because they all do such fabulous work. But the first one that I really got close to was the Early Learning Initiative, which supports families where the parents maybe don't have the reading and writing skills, and there's all sorts of work that's been done that's proven that if a child doesn't learn to read and have a good level of vocabulary at an early age, they never really catch up. And that clearly then is a restrictor from an ongoing educational perspective. So ELI sends and trains local women in the community to go out and read and do educational learning in the homes of these families. And you know, the ladies that go out and do this work are just absolutely inspiring. And certainly in the early days of Basis Point and ELI, they were set up originally in Dublin, but we helped them get set up in Limerick and other Irish cities. And that is something that, for me, is really important about Basis Point, which is it doesn't just focus on Dublin. You know, we are supporting Kilkenny and Cork and Limerick all around the country. And for me, that's one of the things that Basis Point has been really successful. You know, the funds industry isn't just about Dublin, it's about the whole of Ireland.
And you mentioned ELI. At the spring lunch this year, there was a speaker, and if I'm not mistaken, her name is Linda McGrath, who I think was ELI, and she spoke about her experiences, and she was wonderful. She's a really impressive speaker, stood in front of a very large room of people and delivered a very authentic and engaging speech about how she had come to become involved and the kind of work she had done. And I thought she was a fabulous ambassador for ELI and for the work that Basis Point is doing.
Absolutely. And it's interesting for me, you see the progression that individuals have made, and it isn't just the children they help, but it's also that network of volunteers, if you like, who've also hugely progressed and have taken their own educational path as well. And I think, you know, kind of the concept of lifelong learning, you know, you're never too old to learn new skills. And I think, yeah, that's a really powerful message for everybody.
Oh, absolutely. My old boss used to say every day is a school day, and there's always something new to learn, you know?
Yes. Yeah, no, absolutely. I was a few years ago on the board, and I became president of the IOB. And again, you know, very much attitude there of commitment to lifelong learning. And in financial services, things change all the time. So if you don't continue to stay relevant, you know, you're going to fall behind. So, you know, I'm a big supporter of people being given the opportunity to continually upskill, if you like, as they progress their careers.
Oh, absolutely. So much innovation and so much change, and the asset types you talk about today are different than they were last year. You really have to be open and to learning and understanding the new challenges and the new innovations.
Absolutely. I think back to my first job in 1979 was taking staples out of travellers' checks. You know, travellers' checks no longer exist anymore. You know, and you know, for me, it's just a story I tell to young people coming into the industry, how things that you're doing today probably won't exist in 10, 20, 30 years' time. And that's why you need to continually make sure that you are keeping your knowledge relevant and up to date.
I think staples and paper barely exist, Clive. On travellers' checks. One of the things about Basis Point that impresses me, I guess, is the engagement. So it does seem that the funds industry is really invested in it, really has rallied around and wants to get involved. And I wonder, because the industry that we're in, whilst we do help people, the people we help, the end investors, are at a bit of a remove from us. We don't meet them day to day. And maybe if you were a teacher or you're in the medical profession, you kind of see in front of you the people you're helping. And I just wondered, are you any thoughts on that, Clive? The fact that we're a little bit away, we don't get to see, you know, the pot growing bigger so that somebody can send a kid to university or whatever people are saving for into retirement. Whether that's maybe one of the motivating factors that made Basis Point land so well.
Yeah, so I think firstly, the original kind of group that founded Basis Point, you know, Adrian and Emma and Declan and Fiona and Denise, you know, they really captured an opportunity which was big firms, whether it be banks, whether it be audit firms, whether it be law firms, whether it be asset managers, were all upping their game, if you like, in terms of contribution to good causes, and also wanting to be not just writing out checks, because, I'm not saying it's easy to give money away, but first of all, you want to make sure that if you're going to make funds available for charities, that you know that it's going to be well spent, and that the money isn't going to end up going in massive administration costs or not supporting the end objective that was originally stated. But also for people to get involved, because again, I think it's very easy just to write out a check or make a donation, but people do genuinely want to get involved. And for me, that's one of the most powerful things about Basis Point, is that there is a small army of individuals who are serving on various committees, whether it be fundraising, whether it's the governance side, whether it's the committee looking at making sure that the money that we allocate is being properly used, etc., etc. So, it isn't just about the fundraising. And it was an eye-opener for me. I'd never been personally involved in a charity before I got involved with Basis Point. The amount of governance and work that needs to be done just to make sure that things are done appropriately is really important. And it has given lots and lots of individuals the opportunity to get their hands dirty with a charity, and, to your point, really be able to see the output translating itself into tangible benefit. And every year for the last 4 or 5 years, Basis Point has done its showcase event where all of the charity partners come together in a room. Normally one of our member firms, I think it was HSBC last year, kindly made space available, and we have a fantastic evening where all of the charities get to showcase the work they do, aided and assisted by Basis Point. And it's one of my favourite evenings of the year. It's absolutely fun. It's fabulous.
And looking forward, obviously, Basis Point, I think it's about 10 years old. It's come from infancy to being well established and doing tremendous work. Into the future, is there anything particularly in terms of the plans for Basis Point?
So I should say now I'm no longer on the board. It was appropriate from a corporate governance perspective that I took a step back, although I will remain a supporter for as long as I can. But also my current role means I'm spending a lot more time in London. But I would say, and so I'm not really qualified to say what Basis Point should be doing going forward. But I would say that there's a lot to be said for if it's not broken, don't fix it. And there's a methodology, if you like, that really works, which is we've got a fabulous set of corporate and individual patrons who are contributing every year. We have 2 what I would call showcase events, which are the spring lunch and the golf day, which really go to fund the operational running of the charity. And for me, as the funds industry continues to grow in Ireland, and I'm pretty convinced that will be the case, there's no reason why Basis Point can't continue to grow proportionately in line with the success of its patrons, whether it be individuals or corporates.
And so you mentioned there that you've stepped away from the board. So your chairmanship of 10 years is drawn to a close. Is it a bit like, when you put your hand up to coach the kids' football team, it's easy to get in and hard to get out?
Yeah, it was the right time for me on a personal level. As I said, I'm now spending most of my working week in London. And I do think if you're going to be involved in something like Basis Point, if you aren't able to really give it 100%, you can almost do more harm than good. I was really fortunate in that Owen Fitzgerald from BBH was elected to take over from me, and the charity could not be in better hands under Owen's guidance. We've had some fabulous new board members come on, and I think that's also important because in any business or any charity, fresh ideas and fresh eyes are a really helpful injection of energy, but also a check and balance. And it's totally appropriate that people challenge and question why things were done in certain ways. So, I'm really excited. I think Basis Point is in really good hands with its current board and leadership. and there's no reason why it can't continue to go from strength to strength.
Yeah, certainly the baton has been well passed, and I'm sure Owen is going to do a terrific job. He's very well placed for that role. But you're right about the new energy and the new pair of eyes, and you mentioned a couple of times kind of the governance, and I guess anything that involves money always runs that risk. So it really is important that people have confidence that the money is going where the money is meant to go, so they can continue.
Most of the people on the board, and certainly all of the corporates and individuals that are with us as patrons, we're all in regulated roles, and none of us need an issue on something involving a charity. So, one of the things I'm very, very confident on is that the governance and the attention to making sure that everything reconciles, everything is done appropriately, is really important to everybody involved with Basis Point. And I think that's one of the reasons why it has been so successful, gaining additional patronage, if you like, in terms of firms allocating money to Basis Point, is because they can see that governance is very, very strong.
Absolutely. And as we wrap up, Clive, and spoken very highly of Basis Point, is there any particular call to action, anything that people can do that are listening and are interested in getting involved? What's the best way to do that?
Well, firstly, and again, I'm sure everybody at Basis Point will echo this, the work is never done. So what was achieved this year in 24, which will be another record year in terms of funds raised, well, you need to go again. And again, I'll always remember a couple of the charity partners telling us when we were first establishing was, you can sometimes do more harm than good by funding something and then stepping away from it. So that kind of continuous support is really important. So I think, the call to action would be, if you are a corporate patron, if you are an individual patron, please carry on supporting Basis Point. I know I will on a personal level, because, the world is not getting any easier. We all see some of the challenges that exist around Ireland, which are very consistent with the rest of Europe and indeed the rest of the world. But the work that Basis Point continues to support is always going to be relevant, and there's always going to be a need to support young people in their educational needs. So I think the call to action is, if you are a supporter, please continue to be a supporter. If you're thinking about being a supporter, please get involved.
So check out basis.point.ie for all of that information, and the very good website gives you lots of information about past events and upcoming events. My golden tip is, 1, go to Spring Lunch. It's a fabulous event. And 2, get your name down early, because it sells out very quickly, and it's in around May time, and tickets will probably be gone by Christmas, so or early in the new year. Don't hang about. Clive, thanks very much for joining me.
Thank you so much. Enjoyed the conversation.
Great to have you on the show. And thank you for listening. We catch you next time on the Aquest Podcast.
The Aquest Podcast. Funds Industry Conversations.